What I have for you today on the second day of our meal planning journey is tomatoes, basil, garlic, and pasta. It's kind of like a deconstructed pesto sauce. What you do is you start chopping your tomatoes and your basil and your garlic. You get that going into a bowl. You can do it as early as 10 o'clock in the morning if you want, and just leave it on the counter. Throughout the day, go by, give it a bit of a stir, and those tomatoes and their juices are gonna be marinating in with the basil and the garlic, the olive oil, salt and pepper. So we're gonna get busy by starting, first of all, to chop the basil. Now, I've taken these leaves off of this plant, and when you are taking leaves off of a basil plant, it's best not to use metal scissors because it will stop the growth happening from the plant. And you want to go down to a place where the stalk is coming out and there's a couple of leaves underneath. Take your stalk off, and then you're gonna pull your leaves off. And I'll just take them over to the sink for a bit of a rinse. I've already prepared those other ones. I'll dry these off and we will get on our way. So I'm going to make a quick little thing called a chiffonade, which is a fancy smancy chef word, but it's really easy to do. You can take all your basil leaves, you stack them up. I just tend to go from largest to smallest, put them in a stack. This is probably a really big stack, but it's gonna work, no problem. You're just going to cut this into ribbons about 1/2 centimeter apart. What I have here, I would say, is about 1/2 cup of basil leaves in the end when that all comes together, and that's just going to go in the bowl. And that's the very first step. As you may know, when you've had pesto sauce, it is made up of basil, garlic, pine nuts, salt and pepper, and that's about it. So this is the start of, as I said, it's kind of like a deconstructed pesto sauce because we're going to add the ingredients, but we're not going to mix them all together as you would in a pesto and whirl them around. It's going to be a little more freeform than that. The next thing on my list is the garlic. So I have 2 cloves of garlic here. I'm just going to take the end off the garlic, and then give it a quick peel. A little bit of a smash there, a little bit of a smash, and the skins should come off quite easily. Here we go. You can chop these up if you want. You can put them through a garlic press if you want. Or what I'm going to do, first I'm going to cut off this bit that doesn't seem to be so fresh. I'm going to use a rasp. Now the rasp is something that gets the job done fairly quickly. And it's kind of in between being pressed through a garlic press and cutting it up. So I've got a fairly wide rasp here. And there we go. 2 cloves. This dish I'm making is for 2 people. As you might remember, I had those cherry tomatoes yesterday. I'm not going to use them in today's dish, but you can certainly use cherry tomatoes if you can't find the larger ones. No problem. Cherry tomatoes work great in this dish. So there we go. My garlic is in there. Just set that aside. Now to the main event, the tomatoes. Please don't ever put your tomatoes in the fridge. Never, never, never. Tomatoes just don't belong in the fridge. If you put tomatoes in the fridge, they become mealy and they get this just kind of a texture that is not so great. So please store your tomatoes on the counter. I'm just going to take out this core, and some people like to take the seeds out. I certainly don't, not for this particular dish. I like to leave the seeds in because the seeds are going to give you more fiber, and they're going to give the membrane around the seeds is going to give you a lot more juice in this dish. So leave the seeds in. It's actually another reason I do like using cherry tomatoes in this, but I use these bigger tomatoes because it does have more of a juicy feel to it in my experience. Now it is April as we are doing this. The best tomatoes come out in August. I will try to do a fairly quick chop here. It does not have to be fancy dancy at all. You want it to be bite-sized. Any smaller is not entirely necessary. You can. My sister goes to town on this. She makes these like the size of, I don't know, something a mouse would eat, which is fine. She likes to do that. But I go with the quick chop myself. And over here, more chopping, easy peasy. All of these, and while you think this looks like it's a lot of tomatoes, yeah, 4 tomatoes are a lot of tomatoes, but for 2 people, this sauce, when you see it come together with the pasta, you'll understand why it's so important to have, I think, 2 tomatoes at least per person, because it mixes really well, and it absorbs all the garlic and the basil. After I put the tomatoes in, you can see how watery they are. Fabulous. Tomatoes are so good. Good for your skin, high in vitamin C, vitamin A, and full of fiber. So here we go, last one coming up. Lots of tomatoes. And again, as I said, this is something that on a Tuesday, you want to have a really fresh dinner. You make this pasta. If you think this is too many tomatoes, totally fine. Cut down on your tomatoes. Next thing I'm going to do is give it a nice crack of pepper. A lovely sprinkle, a generous sprinkle of salt, because the salt is going to help the juices come out of the tomatoes. So that's all happening in there. And now, a glug of olive oil. This ends up being, I would say, 1 to 2 tablespoons, okay? This now gets to sit on your counter for the day. Now, if you don't have time, if you don't want to do this at 10 o'clock in the morning, then don't do it at 10 o'clock in the morning. Do it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're actually going to use the feta cheese that we used yesterday in the Greek salad. And yeah, we'll put it together that way. I've put the water on to boil. I've got the pasta boiling away, and I'm chopping up my tomatoes, and then it marinates for a long enough time. Of course, the longer you leave it, the more potent it's going to get with the flavors marrying in together. All right, I'm ready to go with my pasta. So I'm just gonna come over here. We boiled this earlier and prepared it. Okay. And I will shift some of that into the bowl. Okay. I've made a generous amount. This is plenty for 2. Oh, there we go. So one more thing that needs to be added to this dish is the feta cheese that was used in a previous dish. I'm saving it to put on now while the pasta is hot. I can give it a crumble. The other kind of cheese, if you're not a feta fan, you can use the buffalo mozzarella. That's also a really nice cheese to use here. And a toss. This does look like a bit of a small bowl. However, I think it's going to be just right. That's it. Basil, tomatoes, garlic, and feta cheese, salt and pepper, olive oil, and you're ready to go. One more thing, just the pine nuts, what I did with those is I toasted them quickly in a frying pan. It really doesn't take a lot of time. After they're toasted, don't let them sit in the pan because they will further cook. So as soon as they're toasted, I put them onto a plate, I let them cool, and then I'll store them in a jar. Now, as I said, I'm not going to put these pine nuts on for this final dish right now. I will dish this up onto plates, and we can do that. I'll show you how this works. You can see the ratio of tomatoes to pasta. It's pretty close in ratio. Lots of each. You want some with every bite, believe me. So now, when I serve this, I would perhaps give it another little crumble of feta, a sprinkle of pine nuts, and voila. This is your final dish. Ready to go, easy. As I said, you can make it early in the day, let it sit on the counter, give it a stir every once in a while, and if it's a hot summer day, you only have to put the cooktop on for about 10 minutes while you boil your pasta. And it's also a really great dish to eat cold. That's it. Basil, tomato, pine nuts, garlic, olive oil, pasta, dinner.